we'll go ahead and get started. First, I want to welcome everyone for coming and joining us. We have some great topics on the docket for this morning, and that includes Dementia 101, Reducing Your Risk, and the other, Medicare 101, The Basics. And we have two presenters who will be giving some good information this morning. But before I introduce our first speaker, I would like to just kind of introduce CRAP, which is the Colorado Coalition for Elder Rights and Abuse Prevention. My name is Dayton Romero. I serve as secretary on the steering committee. In fact, we are looking to recruit more members, so if you're interested in joining the cause and looking to spread statewide awareness through education and informing and improving the statewide understanding of elder and at-risk adult abuse, please see me or any other steering committee members. We have Carrie at the front and Leah, I believe. So again, feel free to reach out to us. We also are looking for volunteers as well as donations, so we'll get that out there as well. We recently revised our website, which is crap.org. We have now included many resources, and it's much easier to navigate, where we'll break down by caregiver resources, resources for professionals, and also resources for older adults themselves. So it's really refined in that it's accessible and, again, user-friendly. So without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce our first presenter, JJ Jordan. JJ works for Dementia Friendly Denver, which is an affiliate of Dementia Friendly America, a not-for-profit, volunteer-based initiative announced at the White House Conference on Aging in 2015, whose mission is to make communities across the nation more dementia-friendly, reduce dementia stigma, and improve the quality of life for those living with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias and their family care partners. Dementia Friendly Denver offers a 1-hour dementia education program at no cost to government, business, academic, community, and faith groups throughout the Denver metro area. So with that being said, JJ, we will invite you up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. How's everyone? Great. I made the drive from downtown Denver this morning. It was just a joy. So I'm really glad to be here, and thank you for that kind introduction. So I am the volunteer community chair for Dementia Friendly Denver. Don't get too hung up on the word Denver, because yesterday I was in Castle Rock and tomorrow I'll be up in Boulder, and I'm all over the place. Just to let you know why this is what I'm doing with my senior years as a volunteer, I will tell you that I was a corporate America person. I was at IBM and McKinsey my whole career, cooking along, and 3 of our 4 parents were diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease within a year and a half of each other. They lived for 16, 14, and 11 years with the disease. So to say that it changed everything about our lives would be an understatement. I liken it to space junk that sort of just fell out of the sky and flattened the Jordan family pretty good. And I think you have 2 choices when that happens. And you can, be despondent for a decade or 2, or you can become an activist and an advocate for all of this and try to be a part of the solution side of things. And that's what I chose to do. I hung in there for 4 or 5 years and then reinvented myself. So everything I do professionally now is also in the field of Alzheimer's and dementia. I just came off a 6-year term on the board of directors for the Alzheimer's Association, and I am their liaison to Capitol Hill. So I have the honor also of being in DC all the time talking to Congress about this subject, and I will tell you this, that's as political as we're going to get today, everybody, aren't you glad? Okay, but anyway, I will tell you this, that everybody is rowing in the same direction with regard to this particular topic. So we have that going for you, and I'll mention a little bit more about that. Up here on the front, we have some dementia resource guides that are yours to take. This is just a pocket-size guide to all of the not-for-profits that can help people through their journey, should their family find themselves in my family's spot. And also I have business cards, so if any of you have groups that you belong to outside of this one, and you'd like to come book us, if you can get 15, 20 or more people together, we'll come and do this at absolutely no cost for you. So take one of those if you're interested as well. Okay, so we're going to be all over the place today. We have about 50 to 55 minutes of robust material, and I promise to leave the last 5 minutes at least for questions. Oh, that's our only rule today, is that we're going to hold the questions to the end, and other than that, come and go, do what you need to do. So let's get started. I should mention that our last lovey, you will hear me refer to my 3 people with dementia as loveys, capital L, and we lost our last lovey 5 years ago last week. People will sometimes say to me, aren't you glad to be out from under all of this? And I say, oh no, I'm just warming up, just warming up. I really don't plan to rest, and none of us really can until we get this thing called dementia, particularly Alzheimer's disease, off the planet. So we're going to explore it robustly today. All right, let's go. We call this Dementia 101, and we add the term reducing your risk. Before we part ways in our hour together today, we're going to talk about the 12 real things that every single one of you can do personally and be the ambassadors to your family to reduce your risk for dementia or delay your onset, should that be your destiny. And listen, it's not lost on me that this is a very intense subject. I do about 5 to 8 of these a week, okay? And I know that it can be intimidating, frightening to some, and so I just want to start where everybody else would probably wrap up, and that is to say, I have never been more optimistic than I am as I stand before you all today that the breakthrough is around the corner in my almost 20 years in this field. We are this close, ladies and gentlemen. And so there's lots of reason for my optimism. When the breakthrough occurs, by the way, I will be throwing a party for the world, so you'll all be invited, and watch for your invitation, okay? One of the reasons for my optimism is that we have 66 clinical trials in phase 3 right now, more than ever before. One of those trials, I believe, has about 14 or 15 months to go and is actually here at the Anschutz Rocky Mountain Alzheimer's Research Center in our neighborhood. So let's just suppose for a second that the answer comes in our backyard. The party shall be all the more lavish. Sound like a deal? All right, so thanks for being here today. Listen, we do have a national Alzheimer's plan. You all might not know that. It was written into law in 2010, the last piece of legislation that was voted on unanimously, both parties, both chambers. That doesn't happen anymore. So it calls for a treatment, prevention, and cure by 2025. And I hang out with neurologists all week, and I can tell you that most of them are in the camp, and I am certainly in the camp that we will meet or beat that goal. We better. Because aside from the heartache of this entire subject, which some of you I'm sure have personally experienced, we are spending $290 billion with a B every year taking care of people with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. $187 billion of that comes directly from CMS, just so you know. I know this is a very knowledgeable group. And by the way, thank you for what you guys are doing. I really appreciate that. We have about a $2.3 billion research budget. We got $350 more million last week. Woo-hoo, for Dr. Francis Collins and his gangs over at the NIH, so we're making progress in that department. We're going to explore some facts today. I know some of you are simply curious, some of you may be concerned about a family member or someone you know and love, and some of you in a room this size with this many people, and we're streaming, I understand as well, are already up to your eyebrows and beyond on this subject. I'm aware of that. So let's get started. I think a great place to start is typical age-related cognitive changes. These are things that are normal, that happen to us as we get a little older. And we have this gorgeous hall today with all kinds of screens, so I'm going to let you read most of those for yourself. The big deal on this slide, everyone, is down at the bottom. And that is that dementia is not normal aging, ever, period, end of story. And someone will inevitably challenge me on that and say, yes, but my mother is 95. Isn't it normal for 95? And the answer is still no. Not normal aging ever. Common at 95, but not normal aging. And that's why we really have to educate ourselves on what this is all about. Before we do that, I want to talk about some reversible conditions that can mimic dementia. The first one being emotional disorders like PTSD and severe clinical depression, etc. Then there's metabolic stuff like hypothyroidism, that's easy for me to say, And then there are brain tumors. I have 7 acquaintances who found out about a brain tumor because of cognitive decline. 5 were benign. They were all operable. I believe these people are going to live as long as I do. Sure, a good thing they found out about it, though, right? Dehydration, I don't have to tell this very esteemed group how difficult it is to get our older adults in our very arid climate to drink enough water, and that can certainly cause a confused or delirious state. And then there are sensory losses. That's just hearing and sight stuff. That happens to all of us as we get a little older and makes it easier to be confused, unfortunately. And vitamin deficiencies. B12 is the big culprit here. Having too much is not a good thing either, but severe deficiencies can certainly cause a delirious state for folks. And then there are infections, urinary UTIs, urinary tract infections being the most common. Ladies, we get them more often than gentlemen, but guys, you get them too. And they can really put our people into a tailspin of confusion. And then I don't need to tell this group, of all the groups I've spoken to in the last 6 months, I don't have to tell you guys that we live in a very alcohol and drug infested society. And sometimes it's a medication interaction as well that causes confusion and dementia type symptoms. And when we get all the doctors straightened out who are all prescribing different stuff and not communicating with each other, cognition returns to a baseline. I want to just say a real 30 seconds about MCI. Mild cognitive impairment is a real thing, ladies and gentlemen, and you can actually get a diagnosis of that from a physician. It's not severe enough to slow you down in your activities of daily living. It is severe enough to show up on a cognitive test. And so it puts you, I like to say, on the watch list, particularly for Alzheimer's disease. You want to report all cognitive changes to a physician immediately, and you want to double down on those 12 things to reduce your risk that we'll be talking about in a few minutes. I always say if we could prevent MCI, we will in fact prevent dementia. Everyone with full-blown dementia will go through the MCI stage. Not everyone with MCI will develop into full dementia. Okay, what is this thing called dementia? You can see I've depicted it under a purple umbrella. That's because it's an umbrella term, much like the word cancer. Many kinds of cancer. There are over 100 types of dementia altogether. I've listed the most common ones. We're going to drill down into those in a moment. The number one question that I'm asked as I'm out in the community all week, every week, is what's the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia? The easiest way to explain it is to say everyone with Alzheimer's disease has dementia. Not everyone with dementia has Alzheimer's disease. So let's talk about the exact types. We start with Alzheimer's disease each and every time, not just because it begins with an A, but that's convenient, but because it is by far the most common type of dementia, accounting for about 70% of all cases. People might not know that. And let me just pause here and tell you some news. I am a woman of science, by the way, and a nerd. I'll just admit that right now. And about 9 or 10 weeks ago, I was so excited because a brand new type of dementia was discovered. It's called LATE, and that stands for limbic predominant age-related TDP-43 encephalopathy. And I think I deserve just a small round of applause for getting through that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So, listen, I've done my brain game for today, right, Dayton? Okay. Well, anyway. All right, you guys. So it affects people over the age of 80. I mean, even 85. And so even if we say 5% of those 70% may have late instead of Alzheimer's, we thought they had Alzheimer's, that's still 65% of all the cases. History lesson okay for everybody on a Thursday morning? Alzheimer's disease was discovered in 1906 by a German doctor, Dr. Alois Alzheimer. He was presented with a 51-year-old female. We respectfully refer to her as Frau Auguste D. She was presented at his clinic by her husband, displaying erratic behavior. And you know what happened to you back then? Off to Bellevue for you, right? But he wasn't buying it, so he took her into his care at the clinic, and 3 years later, at her passing, we discovered the disease we still know as Alzheimer's today. Now, I don't know about you guys, but every time I say this, several times a week, I have the same reaction. 1906? Why are we still talking about this? It speaks to the complexity of the brain. It speaks to the complexity of Alzheimer's disease. But the good news is, it was only 1990 when the scientific and medical community discovered that younger onset Alzheimer's, that's anyone diagnosed under the age of 65, only 3% of the cases, thank goodness. And regular onset, anybody over 65, all the same thing. So they thought, wow, we better get after this because we're going to have tens of millions of people with this condition, which is in fact exactly what is happening. Alzheimer's disease is a brain disease, everyone. It is not a mental illness, not that there should be any stigma about that either, but that's a different subject for a different expert on a different day. This is a disease just like cancer, cardiovascular disease, or diabetes. It's progressive. The trajectory for Alzheimer's disease is like this, a declining arc. And vascular dementia is more like stair steps, steeper dives and longer plateaus. And we'll talk about that in a moment as well. Currently, of course, there is no cure or treatment, but boy, are we working on it, okay? Can't wait for that day. So eventually it is fatal, if nothing else kind of gets you first, I always say, and about 5% of cases are people who die of nothing but Alzheimer's. Otherwise, it is the 6th leading cause of death in our nation, many of those being complications such as aspiration or cerebral hemorrhages from falls. We know, sorry, I keep hitting this thing. We know that it is dormant in our bodies for 20 plus years. So at my age, ladies and gentlemen, if I have Alzheimer's disease, I have it as I'm standing before you today. Plaques and tangles, amyloid beta and tau, TAU, are the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. What we don't completely understand yet is what's cause and what's effect here, particularly on the beta amyloid or amyloid beta, it can go either way, side. We think that perhaps that might be more of an effect where the brain proteins, those are two kinds of brain proteins, not to be confused with regular protein. I've been giving this talk for 15 years, and somebody the other day said, oh, it's toxic protein, so we're not supposed to eat any protein? And I said, oh, no. Listen, this is a different thing. I wonder how many vegetarians I'm personally responsible for. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, right? But anyway, so it builds up to excess, and perhaps it's going to the blood-brain barrier to fight inflammation or infection or something with disastrous side effects. And then the tau is another type of protein that is inside the neurons, strangling them from the inside out. Enough about that. We'll get back a little more in those weeds in a minute. Again, 5.8 million Americans affected. Listen, don't even write that down. And anybody who wants these slides, instead of taking copious notes today, just let us know, and we'll make that available to you. But at any rate, those are the ones we know about, you guys. That's underreported. We passed a piece of legislation on the Wednesday before Christmas last year that will cause the CDC to get involved in this. In fact, they have started. So if I come back to see you all next year, update on that, and I think we'll be stunned at the true number once we get that evidence-based data from CDC. And someone is developing this disease every 65 seconds in our nation. There is not a country on the planet without Alzheimer's disease. Okay, I said there was no treatment. I meant it, you guys, but we do have some symptom relievers. There, you can see them up there, so rather than go through them all with you, you can read them for yourselves. The first class are cholinesterase inhibitors. You know, the most common one probably from TV is Aricept. The second is a glutamate regulator or modulator. That's probably known best as Namenda. And then some genius a couple of years ago invented a combo drug of one of the first three and the second one to keep our lovies from having to take more medication than necessary. Again, I want to make sure these are for Alzheimer's disease symptoms, and the disease is progressing in the background. It is doing nothing to actually treat it or slow it down. It can help some people for some period of time, to some extent, in some cases with some symptoms. So that doesn't sound like a really big medical promise there, does it? But I had very excellent luck in my family with two of our three lovies. I think it bought us a little bit more mental sharpness for a little bit longer. We're not giving medical advice today from the podium, but we want you to know that these things exist so that you can have intelligent conversations with physicians about whether or not these might be appropriate for your loved ones or clients, should that be the case. Basically, 3 stages of Alzheimer's disease: early, middle, late, also known as mild, moderate, and severe. Notice where driving is up there, you guys, in the first category. Now, don't whack your neighbor. That would be horrible. We're pretty spread out today, but put your arms out like this, if you would. Look straight ahead, wiggle your fingers, bring them in until you can see them. This is your peripheral vision, everyone. By the way, those of you under 30 are probably way back here. I'm about here. Now go like this. This is what our lovies are seeing past about middle stage and sometimes in the earliest stages of dementia. The baby stroller is coming across the crosswalk from the side. That's why driving is where it is on this list. Only a professional should make the call, whether or not someone with any form of dementia diagnosed or not is safe to drive. We, as family care partners, just can't be trusted to make an objective decision, because then it adds chauffeur to our mini list of things that we have to do. Notice where managing money is also in the front one. I could tell you guys stories you wouldn't believe, not just an occasional added zero onto the light bill, and instead of electric bill, instead of $85, it's $850. We're talking about thousands of dollars sometimes. So middle stage, more trouble with language, more trouble with grooming and losing things. And then eventually, if this goes to late stage, this will become a 24/7 caregiving experience for the whole family. Would this be a good time to remind you that I've never been more optimistic than I am today that we're going to get this fixed? I'm looking at your very serious faces, as they should be. But again, let me just tell you how much hope is out there right now. It's going to be a great day when that happens. Okay, vascular dementia, number 2 on the hit parade, everybody. About 10% of all the cases. This is when strokes have happened, small TIAs or larger ones. And they interrupt the blood flow to the brain, okay? The location, the size, and the frequency of those incidents determine how much cognitive impairment happens, but it will still be a declining situation. Like I say, more stair-step. And then there's dementia with Lewy bodies. Those are microscopic brain proteins. By the way, we all have amyloid beta and tau in our brains right now. As we're sitting here, it's when they build up to excess that it becomes a problem. And we believe that the excess naturally dissolves during good sound sleep in the case of Alzheimer's disease. These are different kinds of proteins, but again, clumping is in the cortex is a problem. And then there's Parkinson's-related dementia. Lewy body is actually in the Parkinson's family, so there are more hallucinations on that one than there is memory loss. It's not unusual for people in the later stages of Parkinson's to develop full-blown dementia similar to Lewy body or Alzheimer's. And then there's frontotemporal dementia, which in my opinion is the most difficult kind to deal with. And that is nerve cell damage in the frontal lobe, which is here, and the temporal lobes behind the ears. Unfortunately, it hits people at a younger age. The survival length of time with this is much shorter. The average for Alzheimer's now being about a decade. And then, of course, you have lovies like mine, 16, 14, 11 years, because there was really nothing else wrong with them except this brain disease. Okay, so not uncommon to have more than one thing going on, particularly vascular dementia and something else in the later years, because strokes may begin to happen. Okay, let's talk about how our noggins work, and please do let me know if I'm impressing you with my medical jargon, okay? All right. So, yes, our noggins. Yes, thank you very much. So anyway, we have about 100 billion neurons or nerve cells in our brains, and they form this little forest that we've depicted on the screens for you today. I never bring a picture of the real human brain, you guys. It's quite gnarly. And most of these I do are lunch and learns. It'll put you right off your salad. You know what I mean? But anyway, all of these synapses are occurring, firing in our brain, causing us to be human. Our memories, our thoughts, our feelings, our movements, everything about us. In the early stage of any type of dementia, there's just impairment. Our people can have what I call blue sky days, where they are really quite tracking of us and the world around them. My dad recited the preamble to the Constitution in early middle stage Alzheimer's on the way to the doctor one day. It was like, okay, where's John? What'd you do with him? And an hour later, he didn't know what a sweater was, much less where his sweater was. It really wreaks havoc with those of us as care partners because it causes us to question our plans. Are we overreacting? And of course, we're not. That's just the way this goes, unfortunately. And then in the later stages, the brain actually shrinks from those neurons being destroyed. And my sweet mother-in-law, her name was Elsie Jordan, the most perfect person I've ever met, you guys, on the planet. And she was our last one to go. Her neurologist, who's now my neurologist, believes that her brain might have been just slightly larger than my fist at the end of her 16-year journey with this. And I'll swear, you guys, that I got an I love you on that last day. She hadn't spoken for about 5 years, but it had the cadence. It was, and that was my prize for our 16 years together. I'll tell you that right now. Okay, Whoops, I went a little too fast there. Number one risk factor, you guys, is age. Not a doggone thing we can do about it, right? And I don't know about some of you in the room today, but I am way over apologizing for my age. And I know I'm in the perfect spot today to not have to apologize. I just had my 67th birthday, and I'm extremely happy about it. I am looking forward to getting on with my life, but I'd sure like to get on with it without dementia. Are you with me, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, thank you very much. Ladies, I hate to tell you, but we are at the epicenter of this entire subject. 2/3 of all Alzheimer's patients are in fact female. Now some of that's because we live longer, right? But we know that's not all there is to it. In fact, new information is coming out all the time on why it is hormonally we may be more at risk. So I was just at a women and menopause seminar where we're looking at sleep deprivation from that kind of a thing. Makes perfect sense to me. And then just last week, and gentlemen, you can cover your ears if you like, but I have some facts to lay on you. I'm a woman of facts, I believe. And that is that women just discovered have a superior verbal memory. Gentlemen, you'll just have to deal with that, I'm sorry. We remember what people say to us more than males do, but guess what the bad news is? Before we gloat too much, I thought I should tell you that that very attribute may also cause us to be more susceptible to a buildup of tau in our neurons. So we're not high-fiving on that one, just to let you know. And my husband would probably beg to differ with the entire subject. Okay, so anyway, 2/3 of all Alzheimer's patients, caregivers rather, are also female. You might not know that everyone with Down syndrome will have the pathology of Alzheimer's disease by around age 40. If they live into their 60s, as many of them are now doing, they will, in many cases, develop full-blown dementia. The good news is that it's an entire group of cohorts that we can study who are wonderful participants in trials. The second most common question I'm asked everyone is this hereditary? The answer is unfortunately yes, but I say to some extent. Everyone in the auditorium today and on the stream has a 10% chance of developing Alzheimer's past the age of 65 without a family history. And then people like me with one parent, my husband with two parents, 25% chance. Hey, I'll take the 75% chance that I won't be developing this, and you can bet the Jordans are doubling down on the 12 things. There are genes involved. There are lots of genes. More were discovered last week, so that's exciting too. There's a deterministic gene where 200 families on the entire planet everyone in the family will develop Alzheimer's by 40 or 50, very sad, but only 200 on the entire planet, very rare. The gene that we talk about most is ApoE4. We could all tootle off this afternoon, probably do it in a kit at this point, right? Find out if we have 1 or 2 copies of ApoE4. Nobody's recommending that you do that because if you do have 1 or 2 copies, it does not guarantee you're going to get Alzheimer's disease. And likewise, if you have 0 copies, you're not off the hook. So it's a wonderful diagnostic tool, however, for science. Okay, speaking of diagnosis, we've made such huge progress in the last 5 years. I'm excited to tell you about that today. We'd better, because only 50% of all people with any type of dementia are actually getting a formal diagnosis. That's got to stop, you all. We now have the means by which to do this that we'll talk about. But here's the real kicker, everyone. Of that 50% where a physician has made the call, only 50% are being told. This is exactly where cancer was in the 1950s, and we have to change that. We have to change it. So, the number one reason why you want to know, I realize your loved ones who already have dementia may not want to know, but this falls in your court. The reason you want to know, number one, might not be Alzheimer's or dementia. Remember the B12? Ta-da! Remember the brain tumor? Uh-oh. Everything in between, you got to go find out. The number two reason you want to know is that if this is your destiny, you have a lot of work to do. Lots of financial planning and legal issues. By the way, I always say we don't give legal, financial, or medical advice from the podium at Dementia Friendly Denver because I meant to go to law school and med school, but I forgot. Okay, oops. So anyway, but I'm going to break my own rule, you guys, and give you a piece of legal advice today, and that is, when you turn 50, or if you're already there, as soon as possible, do your paperwork. Duh, right? your durable medical, legal powers of attorney, your living wills, all of that. So 20 and 30 years later, if things get hairy at your house like they did at mine, why, at least you won't have to worry about that. Safety and transportation we talked about are big issues to work on, and that's another reason you want to know. And last but not least, you want to empower. Who do you pick for your proxy? I want to say to my loved ones, oh yes you can, oh no you can't. Don't even think about it, right? With regard to my own care. Lots of things to talk about. And if I haven't convinced you yet, I got 3 more shots at it, ladies and gentlemen. The first one is that, remember those symptom drug therapies that I talked about? They work better the sooner you start them. So sticking your head in the ground and denying all of this and is really denying your lovies the possibility of some relief in some symptoms. And then the second one is it helps people remain independent longer. And people will say, well, how does that work? Well, listen, I don't have to tell you guys, diabetes is also rampant in our society, correct? If you have diabetes and memory loss, are you going to remember to take your diabetes medicine? Probably not. Or any other medicine that is keeping your body in balance. So that way a physician can assign a MedMinder to use to keep you as healthy as possible. We believe, this is big, you guys, listen to this. We believe that we could avoid or prevent 1/4 of all hospitalizations of people with any type of dementia through early detection and diagnosis. And let me just tell you, those acute care experiences are extremely overwhelming and traumatic for an entire, as I call them, dementia family, okay? All right, and then last but not least, oh my goodness, my wonderful neurologist friends would never forgive me if I didn't say this one. The earlier you find out about this, the more clinical trials you might be appropriate for. And the best way to do that, everyone, is through the Alzheimer's Association website. You do alz.org. On the browser line, you put in trial match. Just like it sounds, all one word. You're not signing up for a clinical trial, so relax. You're just throwing yourself or your lovey into the pool. It took me about 1.5 years to get my first hit out of the pool, and now I'm in 6 clinical research studies as the well daughter of an Alzheimer's patient. It makes me feel like I'm doing something as a woman of science. Okay, geriatricians, just the opposite of a pediatrician, taking care of those of us over 65, my favorite kind of people in the wide, wide world, and neurologists. These are the big-brained men and women who are going to figure this out for the rest of us. And they are a wonderful way to get a diagnosis, along with neuropsychiatrists and psychologists and all of those fine people too. And referral lists for how to find those people are also available on the resource guides that are up in the front for you. We can get a 90 to 95% clinically accurate diagnosis without expensive testing. A lot of that, particularly in the case of the 65 to 70% of Alzheimer's cases, are by ruling out other things. You can see a brain tumor or a stroke on an MRI. An MRI will pick up Alzheimer's later once the shrinkage has occurred. In the early stages, not so much. And so that's a pretty good, that's not a bad accuracy rate right there, but I have better news for you yet. Before we do that, here's what preparing for the doctor's visit looks like. And again, I'm going to go through this quickly so you can have the slides later if you like. But we have to be involved. We have to be. Our people are poor medical historians. The stuff my dad would say at the doctor's office had nothing to do with what was going on with his health. So we have to be involved in that process, and we have to list everything. Down at the bottom, I'll just mention that it astounds me when somebody goes, oh, I saw something on TV the other day, it sounded good. I think I'll start taking that, you know. And I'm like, please, talk to your doctor first. A lot of those supplements are not FDA controlled. There are contaminants in them. A few years ago, I learned my lesson because I got a scolding like you wouldn't believe. I was taking some oil while my family has high cholesterol. When I went to the doctor the next time, my cholesterol was up 20 points, right? He goes, stop it. What part of check with me before you ingest anything that might even look like a medicine do you not understand? So I won't go there again, you guys, okay? All right, and then here are the steps in the assessment. Listen, the middle part of this looks a whole lot like an annual wellness visit, right, you guys, with medical and psych evals on the ends and sandwiching that. And as long as the Affordable Care Act is in place, you all, an annual wellness visit, I'm sure you know, is available to every American at no cost, and a cognitive check is part of that. Unfortunately, and here's the next one down at the bottom, 82% of all older adults say that their cognition should be checked every year. 16% are getting the job done. Now, physicians are not offering this up. I'm sure it's to save time, to be totally honest with you. But if we don't know to ask for it, that it's part of that annual wellness visit, why it doesn't get done. So help us spread the word on that. Now, here's the other big news that I get excited about as a woman of science. We've had PET scans for years, right, everybody? But a genius about 4 or 5 years ago invented a radioactive dye that can now be injected into a living brain. So no longer do we have to wait all the way to an autopsy to be definitively sure that someone has Alzheimer's disease. And what we don't know through these PETs is whether or not that person will be one of the ones to develop full-blown dementia. But we can see the buildup of amyloid beta and tau in those brains. And the other reason I'm so, now, oh, by the way, nobody's suggesting you all rush out and get one of those either. They're, $5 to $6 grand, not paid for by insurance traditionally. But what a great diagnostic tool for science. And the other thing that excites me is that some of those early clinical trials that failed, remember the 90 to 95% accuracy? Well, that can really mess up a clinical trial, you guys. That's enough of a percentage to make a difference. Some of the people in those early trials didn't have Alzheimer's for an Alzheimer's trial. And now everyone will have one of these PET scans before they enter a clinical drug trial. Big news. Cerebral spinal fluid is another way to see that. That's a spinal tap, which is not exactly fun and games. And then we're looking for biomarkers, you guys. So cholesterol is to cardiovascular disease as blank is to Alzheimer's disease. We know of one already, and those are the blood vessels behind the eye, the retina being part of the brain instead of the eyeball. We're looking for, and we now have, in clinical trials only, a simple blood test for Alzheimer's disease. Only in clinical trials at this point. And my hope for all of us is that when that $100 blood test or cheek swab or whatever becomes publicly available, it will coincide with the first true treatment as well, so that not only can we find out affordably and easily, but we will all want to, because there is something more than the 12 things we can do about it. In the meantime, the 12 things are what we have, and we're going to cover those. Okay, when this diagnosis, in my case, three in a year, come in, emotions run high. I'll let you read all these emotions up on the screen. This is what families are feeling. And by the way, if I could split this screen, one of these would be for me as the family care partner and one for my lovey. In the beginning, we're all kind of feeling the same thing, confusion and worry. The uncertainty, particularly of Alzheimer's disease, is unbelievable. If you've met one person with Alzheimer's, you've met exactly one person with Alzheimer's. If you met a caregiver of a person with any type of dementia, you've met us all. We all have very typical challenges to go through. I do want to mention the denial one up on the right, and that is because of this. We, as cognitive thinkers, can be in denial for the entire journey. I highly recommend against it, right? And I tell people, you can start off that way, but it's going to take care of itself because undeniable stuff is going to start happening. So you can be up to bat with some batting practice, or you can be up to bat without batting practice. I highly recommend the batting practice. So our loveys, on the other hand, can only be in denial in the earliest stages because it's a cognitive thought. And after they reach a certain tipping point, they're not in denial, they're living their own reality. Just something to remember. Here are the 10 warning signs. Very quickly, I'm going to dash through these. Don't be the worried well. I don't want you going, I've done that, and I've done that, and I've done that. Of course you have. But the frequency with which these things are plaguing someone is what you need to pay attention to. Memory changes that disrupt your daily life. I'll use my sweet Elsie. Everyone lived over in Kansas before we brought them over here to care for them. We were over there for a visit, walked into my sweet Elsie's kitchen. There were Post-it notes on every canister, cabinet, and drawer. This is a woman who knew her kitchen. Number 2, challenges in planning and problem solving. You guys know what ambrosia salad is? Marshmallows, coconut, pineapple, sweet, right? There were cherry tomatoes in the ambrosia salad. By the way, that's nasty. Don't try that at home, okay? But we knew something was up. Number 3, difficulty completing familiar tasks. I was doing this talk a couple of months ago, and a gentleman said his dad's been playing a game of pickup b-ball over at the Wash Park Rec Center every Saturday morning for the past 20 years, and he called his son and said, "Son, I can't find the rec center this morning." His familiar path had become unfamiliar. Number 4, confusion with time or place. I went to pick my dad up, my husband's dad. We've been married, I believe, for 112 years, so his dad, my dad. Thank you. And I went to pick him up in July, pushing 100. He had his heavy coat and boots on for me when I got there, not realizing what the season was. We already talked about this, the spatial difficulties. Our people just don't see the way we see, you guys. Dad was not a vegetable dude, so if we presented him with a white dinner plate with a roll, mashed potatoes, and green beans, he would only eat the green beans. I knew something was up, right? He didn't see them. So we had dark-colored plates for light-colored foods, light-colored plates for dark-colored foods, so he could enjoy his menu. Problems with words. Anybody gone, what's the word, what's the word, what's the word? And you shall again do that. But you know what we do? We just reach up and grab another one from our vast vocabulary, drag it down. We continue. Every once in a while, you'll lose your train of thought. We get back on the tracks. Our people will not be able to pick up the pieces like we do. Anybody ever lost anything in the room today? Okay, and you shall again. If you find the keys you're looking for in the jacket you wore yesterday, relax. If you find them in the freezer, might be cause for concern. That's not where keys gonna live. I think you get it. Anybody ever made a poor decision or judgment in the room today? Now that would be an interesting session, wouldn't it, if we just passed the mic around on that one. Don't start with me, I've made some doozies. But listen, you guys, telemarketers are the bane of our existence in my field of work, right? I don't have to tell this particular group of all the groups that elder fraud and abuse is rampant. So, enough said about that, but it's not always sinister, you guys. My sweet Elsie loved pink, and she would see a sweater in a catalog and order it, 11 more would show up because she had forgotten she had ordered it. So I was sending them back as fast as she was ordering them until we got that straightened out. Withdrawal from social or work activities. I want to mention this one because I did this at a huge company downtown last week, yeah. And that's all I'm going to say because you guys would recognize the name in about a blink. So I want to protect this gentleman. He came up afterwards and said, I'm in trouble. Could I have a word with you, please? He looked to me like he was late 50s, early 60s maybe. He said, I was an hour and a half late to work this morning because I didn't recognize the plaza out in front of my building. And I think my boss is starting to catch on. I thought, I'll bet. I'll bet. By the way, that gentleman is getting all the help he can possibly get through the Alzheimer's Association. At Dementia Friendly Denver, and by the way, we were one of 6 pilot cities, and now there are 378 cities doing this across. I forgot to tell you that, but that's pretty cool, don't you think? And so, at any rate, we're the troubadours. So not everybody is doing a thing like this. We choose an educational approach. Our small, very small volunteer steering committee. How many of you know Peggy Spalding? Anybody know Peggy Spalding out there? She's fabulous. She sits on our team. And we chose an educational approach because we had no money. So we go around doing this for free. Somebody else may be doing another thing. You may never see me again, but we want to make sure that we hook you up with those people that are going to be instrumental in the care and support through the journey. Okay, last but not least, I can't look at this slide. I can't look at this, even after 5 years, you guys. It gets me. This is unacceptable that this is what my lovies had to go through. This cannot stand, okay? Change in mood and personality. And we're not talking about, you kids get off my lawn kind of stuff. We're talking about real changes in baseline mood and personality. If you don't mind, I'll let you read those for yourself. For my sake, we're moving on. What should you do if you see any of these 10 signs? You got to talk about it, compare notes with family and friends, and you have to see a doctor. Remember the B12, ta-da, remember the brain tumor, uh-oh, you got to go find what's going on. Whether or not that early detection and diagnosis occurs is instrumental to how the entire journey is going to go for any given family. I can't say that enough. Caregiver overview, there are over 16 million of us taking care of those 5.8 million that we know about. That number is unreported, underreported. Here are the Colorado numbers, everyone. We put in 18.5 billion hours of unpaid care a year. Listen, I ran IBM for a couple of decades, and I got to tell you, I'm a businesswoman. That's $234 billion worth of revenue. That's half the size of Walmart's annual till, okay? We are an industry, ladies and gentlemen. 74% of us report being concerned about our own health. That throws us into the healthcare system. We take such crummy care of ourselves. I can't even begin to tell you. I don't think I'm the dumbest woman you'll ever meet, but I went for 3 years one time without ever going to my own doctor or dentist. Duh. I was in so many doctor's offices that I thought it counted. Well, it wasn't my doctor, right? You get it. Self-care, respite, extremely, extremely important. And these kind people in the resource guide can help you with that. Here is the little unexpected career that we find ourselves in. The first part of stuff I call the 36-hour day, because you can't get it all done in 24, that's for sure. And that's all just the stuff that it takes to run a typical household. Some of you ladies may recognize the old, very old adage about eating for 2 during a pregnancy. Well, I thought of myself as thinking for 4 every single day. It was exhausting work, I'll tell you. And then down at the bottom, the more consequential stuff, perhaps, that's the advanced planning. We become junior doctors and nurses and caseworkers and financial planners and attorneys and accountants trying to keep the boat afloat, and in some cases more than one boat afloat. Here are the behaviors that we learn to deal with as family caregivers, and professional caregivers, of course, are expert at these as well. The repetitive questioning one I'll touch on. 100% of everybody with any kind of dementia will ask you the same questions over and over again. And I'm about to crack the code for you. If you haven't figured it out already, you probably have. Answer the question cheerfully. They are asking it of us for the very first time in their minds. It takes less energy, less facial muscles, less of everything to just say, "It's Thursday, Dad. It's Thursday, honey," as it does go, "It's Thursday." Whose blood pressure just went up? Mine, right? Plus, I embarrass the person I love the most. We talked about the anxiety. Unfortunately, shadowing is when they stick like glue to us out of insecurity. They know that they are very dependent on us. Sundowning occurs between 3 and 7 in the afternoon when the sun sets. Some of it is biorhythms. We don't quite have it all figured out. Some of it is menacing shadows that dance on the walls. Here's the deal. We want to take it down a notch in the afternoon. You do the tough stuff like the bathing, the hygiene, the doctor's appointments in the sweet spot in the morning, not really early because our people aren't early risers, in that middle sweet spot, and then everything gets calmer and calmer in the afternoon, hopefully. Sleeplessness is a big problem. Days become nights, nights become days. Cheerfulness. Our people are in there, you guys, and they hate it when we talk about them like they're not there. We can make them cry in the moment very easily. You don't get a pass because they won't remember tomorrow how horrible you were today. They really do live in the present. And suspicion, paranoia, part of the deal. Pacing, unfortunately, part of the deal from an anxiety point of view. Please report pacing to a doctor immediately, and sometimes there is something that can be done to help someone with that, but you have to be really careful about fall risk as well. And then wandering is the big game changer. 60% of our people will wander during their journey, and that changes everything. And I am the least judgmental person you guys will ever meet, I guarantee it. There's no one way to do any of this. But this is when families have to decide, are we going to secure our homes, their homes? You have to be able to get out in a fire, right? Or are we going to choose residential community, residential care? And sometimes you have a mixture of all of that before the journey is over. Confusion equals discomfort, which equals behavior. That's the equation. So that's what we're trying to do, is limit the confusion. Here are the communication tips. We're right on track, I believe, since we got a little bit of a late start. Use short sentences and basic words. Less is more. We never talk baby talk to our people. These are adults. We answer their repetitive questions cheerfully. We try not to ask them questions. This is the hardest one on this list, you guys. If you start off saying you're not going to ask them any questions, you'll get down to about 50%. That is about as good as anybody I've ever seen. Let me give an example. Instead of saying to Dad, "Dad, do you want orange juice or apple juice this morning?" I will just say, "Dad, here's some orange juice." And I don't say, "Fresh squeeze, no pulp, from Florida." Too much information, right? If he doesn't drink it, I put the apple juice out. Cranberry never makes the scene because he hates it, and that's my job to know, right? But we're just trying to limit the number of choices that our people have to make and in their brains, which can be confused, obviously. We pay attention to our tone. We allow plenty of time for conversations. We're living on dementia time. We limit distractions, particularly in the bathroom and the kitchen. We have meals to ingest and chores to do, not to be indelicate. We focus on feelings, not facts. My dad said to me one day, you know, honey, this time last week, your mother and I were in Paris. And I said, Paris is a lovely city. And we left it at that. We never criticize, we never challenge, we never correct, we never argue. These are people with a brain disease. You will never win an argument with someone with dementia. You'll just feel worse about yourself and upset them in the process. We redirect to pleasant activities when upsets occur, and you can be a perfect care partner, and upsets will occur. It's part of the deal. Patience, patience, patience. Here are all the resources that are in the guides that are yours to take today, and I'm bringing it home, Dayton, bringing it home. Here are the 12 real things. It sounds like we have a long way to go. We don't, so get your questions ready, okay? I have a couple of things to say before we do it. These 12 things, simple in concept, not so simple because of this little thing called willpower that you'll see in a minute, but these are for real. The verbiage around all of this changed in March of 2018. The scientific and medical community used to say, if you do these 12 things, it might possibly reduce your risk or delay your onset for Alzheimer's, and that changed to will probably. That may not sound like a big deal to you guys, but that's a really big deal. So these are for real. And the last thing I'll say before we dive in, these go pretty quickly, and then you can pepper me with questions, is this. So remember how I said that at my age, if I have Alzheimer's, I have it as I'm standing before you, right? Well, let's just suppose for a moment that I'm due to develop full-blown Alzheimer's at 85. And I could delay that to 90 or 95. I might not care because something else got me first. And I know this may seem a little personal, but I would like to share with all of you my personal plan for demise. I plan to expire from sheer exhaustion on the dance floor in Argentina, doing the tango with a handsome octogenarian because I've always preferred younger men. All right, I'm going to let you think about that just for a second. I always say, bada boom, I'll be here all week. No, not really, I'm leaving soon. All right, you guys ready? Number one, break a sweat. This is the closest thing to a silver bullet we have at the moment. Regular cardiovascular exercise. Be sure you talk to your doctor before you start a regimen to make sure that it's in compliance with the rest of your health issues, so you're not doing more harm than good. Fuel up right, a diet high in fruits and vegetables and lean proteins. Avoid salt and sugar and fatty meats and fried foods. Blueberries, blueberries, blueberries. At our house, we don't say, have you had your blueberries today? We say, have you taken your blueberries today? Very good. Antioxidants, anti-inflammation. Follow your heart. If it's good for your heart, it's good for your brain. 1/4 of every heartbeat shoots oxygen directly to your noggins. So you have to look at your system, of course, as a whole. There is a direct correlation between cognitive decline and cardiovascular disease, between cognitive decline and diabetes and obesity, between cognitive decline and hypertension and high blood pressure. That one's been getting a lot of attention lately. So when your doctor scolds you, pay attention for brain's sake as well. Talk to your doc. This sounds like the same thing. What this is, hey, pick an age. I picked 50, whatever, and ask your doctor to ask you about your brain health every year during your annual wellness visit versus the other way around, just in case you end up being one of those deniers. You want to make sure that that's checked every year. Mind your mental health. We already talked about that being a risk factor. So typically, depression is a treatable thing, so be sure that you're talking to your doctor about that. Manage your stress. Make sure, you guys, that you are doing whatever. Yoga or meditation. Anybody discovered grown-up coloring books yet? Fabulous, very calming for all of us. But there is a direct correlation, ladies and gentlemen, between Alzheimer's disease and smoking. Enough said. Hit the books. You got to keep learning, you guys. Take a class. Real classes with real instructors are best. Online learning's good too. Learn a language. Learn a musical instrument. Keep it going. You got to keep it active. The next one has a little bit of controversy around it because not every brain game you play has science behind it. I do them all. Why not, right? They're fun. But the ones where you are testing your peripheral vision, we already talked about the importance of that. Real science. I went to a 2-hour plenary session at our International Medical Conference a couple of years ago. So do those first, where you're identifying something in the middle of the screen and then things around it. Very, very good. I think there was something like 20% less Alzheimer's in people who did those games. And I always say, hey, listen, if you can't find a brain game you like, go out to IKEA and buy a wall unit and try to put the thing together with less than 5 pieces left on the other end, right? Okay, you get it. All right, you guys, we have to buddy up. We have to socialize, you guys. In this age of social media, we have to seriously talk to one another and interact as human beings. Volunteering, dance lessons, those kinds of things to really communicate with our fellow peoples. All right. Listen up, you might be surprised to know that there is a 20% higher incidence of Alzheimer's and untreated hearing loss during middle age. I don't even know what middle age is anymore, so I say 50 to 75. Listen, the minute my husband found out about that, he has mild hearing loss, runs in his family, he went out the next day. And I am not a paid spokesperson for Costco, but let me tell you, it saved us thousands of dollars. Free hearing exams and this exact same thing he was about to lay big bucks out for, got for much less there. Your brain cannot process what you didn't hear to begin with, and I must say it has made my life a little happier too. Okay, catch some Z's. We talked about the importance of good natural sleep. Be sure you talk to your doctor if you're having sleep issues, particularly before you take any medications. There was just a huge article about, and again, I don't get over my skis by giving any medical advice, so read it for yourselves, but some sleep aids or medications may even increase the instance of Alzheimer's disease, so be sure you check with your doctor on that. Put your devices in another room. Make it cool, make it dark, give yourself the best shot of having those brain proteins that are building up to toxic levels dissolve. And then last but not least, we live in Colorado, you guys. We're sliding down or around something summer and winter. Helmets, 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 seat belts, seat belts, seat belts. You have to protect your brain, and the last thing you ever want to do is bang your head against a wall, so if you think you're going to have a hard day at work, throw a helmet on to begin with, I always say. All right, you guys, that's what we got. Thank you for your attention today, and I think we have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions. Okay, fire them at me. Anybody? No? All right, well, oh, yes, ma'am. Yes?
One thing you did mention about hearing that I'm curious about is I've had tinnitus since I was 1 years old. And it's one of those things, the Sound Relief Center says they can cure 80% of it. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Katie.
So I'll say it again.
Yeah.
One thing you didn't mention in terms of hearing is tinnitus. And I've had tinnitus since I was 20 years old. And it is a very annoying, irritating, maddening thing. And you can't take a pill for it.
Right.
Sound Relief Center says that they can cure 80% of it, but they're not on my insurance coverage, and I don't know how much that would be. But that's one thing that just makes me crazy.
Yeah.
I have age-related hearing loss a little bit, but you know the Medicare and everybody send you things about hearing aids, and we can get you this hearing aid and that hearing aid. I don't have that, but this ringing in my ears makes me crazy.
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with it. I have a little touch of vertigo from time to time, and the tinnitus comes along with that. Then mine goes away, fortunately, so I'm not in your boat. But listen, the main thing is, and by the way, I can't quote any studies today about that and the instance of dementia. If you Googled that in on any browser line, I bet you'd come up with lots of articles to read about it. It sounds like you're going to a doctor about it, which is, of course, what you need to do, and treat what you can treat, of course. And then I always say, if you have an area where you might be deficient in those 12 things, make up for it by doing more of the other things. And this just came out last week. I forgot to mention it. But if you pick 5 things out of the 12-thing list, and those 5 things are good sleep, diet, exercise, not smoking, and alcohol in moderation only, and I throw that one in under the diet one, but I didn't mention it. If you do 2 to 3 of those 5 things, your risk for dementia is reduced by 39%. If you do 4 to 5 of those things, you have a risk reduction of 59%. So don't ever let anybody tell you, well, nothing you can do about this. We can do a lot about it from a lifestyle issue. And it sounds like you're doing the right thing. Did I have another question in the back? Yeah. And then I'm going to turn it over to our back to Dayton, and to our next speaker, whom I'm sure will be fabulous.
Thank you. I had a question. You mentioned the CDC getting involved in tracking early cognitive decline.
Yes.
Is the CMS looking at it as well to try to encourage providers to do that. We work in the healthcare system,
Yeah.
and we know it is very much underdiagnosed, and we do try to encourage people to do their annual wellness visit.
Yep.
But it's so important to get that baseline.
Yes, yes, yes. You and I didn't practice this, did we? We've never met. We can talk about. No, yes, absolutely. I did mention all the fabulous legislation that has been passed over the last 3 or 4 years. I'm in D.C. all the time, and every time one of these things passes, the Hope for Alzheimer's Act was the big one that caused providers to really get more information about this so that they can share it with everybody else, and most of those people are in the CMS world for sure. That was passed 2 years ago. This most current one has to do with more evidence-based data, so we'll know what the true numbers are. It also has to do with funding local health departments, such as the ones we're all living in our counties and communities, for early detection and diagnosis. It's just going to be great. So if I don't have time to list them all today, but we've passed about 4 or 5 major pieces of legislation in the past 5 years that cause CMS and everybody from a government point of view to be more involved. And they want to be, because we have to get this fixed.
Great. And if we could get those as just maybe in the resource or slides,
Yes.
that would be great. Thank you.
Let me come up with that.
Okay.
All right. Bye. Oh, thank you. Was that my thing? There I go. Listen, I know how to ring off. You know what I mean? So thank you very much, you guys, for your attention today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your session. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, JJ. That was my first time seeing that presentation, and did I learn a lot, really, from keeping a keen eye for signs and symptoms, and being on the lookout for our lovies, and also being aware of what sort of preventative measures there are in place, from working out, keeping diet, and those sort of things. And what was most encouraging for me was that there's people like you kind of behind the scenes working hard, moving research forward, and kind of keeping in the loop as to what the steps are to really make a difference in this disease. And you're just really encouraging on that, there is a bright future. And thank you so much for the resources as well. Resources are always so helpful. So feel free to come up and grab them after the presentation. We'll also get them at the table. So whenever you're exiting, you can pick them up at the table.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, JJ. So next, we will have our next presenter, Miss Kathy Madden. She will be presenting on Medicare 101, the basics. Kathy works for the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies, Division of Insurance, and has been the SHIP SMP Partner Services and Training Manager for the past 6 years. She has spent most of her career training all over the country on a variety of topics in the human services realm. She has experience and knowledge about Medicare, Medigap, Medicare Advantage, and Medicare-related topics. Kathy is passionate about advocating for seniors and understands that consumer education is key to beneficiaries making informed Medicare decisions and preventing fraud and abuse within the Medicare program. She is excited and honored to help consumers, stakeholders, and partners navigate the complex Medicare system. So, with that being said, I think she stepped out of the room for a couple of minutes. So, we have a few minutes for a little rest, and we'll get back to it. Thank you all again. Miss Kathy Madden.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today to hear my presentation on Medicare. My name's Kathy Madden. I'm with the Division of Insurance SHIP program. And the SHIP program is a senior health insurance program. We basically help Medicare beneficiaries with any of their issues, whether it be claims, trying to find a plan, trying to find a doctor. They can't get other things from other agencies that they need. Just a myriad of issues that we deal with. And usually we're sort of the last resort because a lot of people don't know SHIP exists. So by the time they get to us, their hair is on fire about these issues. And so what we do is talk people down and let them know that we can help them. A lot of times it's not an overnight process, but we can certainly help them with their Medicare issues. So that's what we do. We're located on 1560 Broadway downtown, but we have, SHIP has, we're a volunteer organization, and we have affiliates all over the U.S. And so Colorado has probably 12 affiliates that we deal with around the state. And so local Medicare beneficiaries can go to their local offices and get help. They don't necessarily have to come to Denver. So, I think this is welcome to the wonderful world of Medicare. Medicare is 53 years old, believe it or not. We've only been in existence for that long. So if any of you are young and you think Medicare's been around forever, it really has not. It was only in 1965 that Medicare really came into existence. Prior to that, if people were over 65 and they got sick, which they tend to do, they were pretty much on their own. So Medicare kind of came in and looked at some of those problems of keeping people out of poverty when they're older. So, you know, depending on how you look at it, it's either a good or a bad thing. Some fun facts to know or tell. There are about 55 million Medicare beneficiaries in the U.S. That includes aged and disabled individuals, because both of those populations can be on Medicare. Baby boomers are aging into Medicare at the rate of, and I should have updated that slide, it's actually 10,000 people a day. If you can believe that, that means 10,000 people are entering into a government program every day. And I tell you, probably 3/4 of those people don't know anything about this program. It astounds me that all of us, when we reach 65, are eligible if we have enough work orders. But a lot of people ask me every day, you have to pay for Medicare? Because they assume it's been taken out of your check from the day you started working. There's that little Medi on your check. That's the Medicare Part A premiums, basically, being taken out. But there are costs associated with Medicare on the back end, and we'll talk about some of those. But it does amaze me that a lot of people do not, they think Medicare is going to be free at the end of their life, and it is not. Colorado has about 785,000 Medicare beneficiaries, which is about 13% of Colorado residents. That's a huge population. Our dual eligibles, meaning they get Medicare and Medicaid, are about 77,000 people, about 9%. And it depends on, there's a lot of factors that go into the under 65 population and whether or not they can are eligible for Medicare, and we'll talk about that as well. So what is Medicare? Medicare is a national health insurance program for people 65 and over or under 65 with certain disabilities. So you can enroll in Medicare whether you're still working or not, because a lot of people now work past 65. Back in the day at 65, you got that gold watch, you were good to go, and you went off into retirement. Now people are working into their 70s. So what they'll do is defer their Part B in Medicare, because you have to pay a premium for that. They'll defer their Part B Medicare because they usually get that coverage through their employer, and then just get their Part A, and then just wait until they get ready to retire to pick up their Part B. We see that a lot. Enrollment is not handled by CMS. It's handled by the Social Security Administration, which is good for us. And I do want to just throw in a caveat real quick. I am not from CMS, so I know that there's a lot of issues that people have around CMS, and I'm not the person for that. I work with SHIP, who also follows rules with CMS. I just wanted to clarify that. And Medicare is not to be confused with Medicaid. Medicare is an age-based program or under 65 disabled. Medicaid is an income-based program. You have to qualify due to income eligibility. So, who's eligible? People 65 or over, again, under 65 with certain disabilities. People lawfully admitted for permanent residence in the U.S., meaning they have to be in the U.S. for 5 consecutive years. So you can't, what we're finding is, I did an event not too recently for the Sudanese population. And what was happening there is the older people would go back to their country and visit and then come back to the U.S., not knowing that it was 5 consecutive years. They thought it was a cumulative situation. So they would be ineligible after the 2 years they came back. They had to start over for the 5 years. A lot of people don't know that. But you have to be here at least 5 years. And so then the question came up, what is 5 years? So I did some research, and you can go home for a vacation for a couple weeks or a month. That's fine. But when they're talking about if you're going back and you're working, you know, there's a way to find out those things. So it's really just sort of you have to be in the U.S. for 5 years to qualify for Medicare. Spouses that hitchhike on another spouse's record. So what that means is, let's say you have 2 spouses, and one was a caregiver or homemaker, and they stayed home and they worked and they took care of the house. And the other people were out working, and they actually were creating a work record. In order to get free Part A in Medicare, you have to have at least 10 years of work history or 40 work quarters. And of course, if you stayed home and took care of the house, you wouldn't have that. But they don't want to leave that other spouse destitute, right? So what they do is let that spouse hitchhike on the other spouse's work record, so they too have their 40 quarters in. Disabled children and adults who have been receiving SSA disability benefits for at least 24 months would qualify. So on the 25th month, they could pick up their Medicare. And we get issues about that a lot. People don't know that transition, and so they don't know they've been put on Medicare, and that messes up the effective dates down the road. So that's something to really pay attention to if you've applied for disability, when you actually got awarded your disability. And people with ESRD or Lou Gehrig's disease are also qualified for Medicare, because those diseases are such fast-tracked, you know, ugly diseases. You can get on Medicare a lot quicker than normal. So what is a Medicare card? It really just is a red, white, and blue card that identifies people that they have Medicare. Those cards were just changed out last year. Everybody who had a Medicare card got a brand new Medicare card, because the other ones had your Social Security number on it. But again, in 65, nobody thought that was an issue, so they put the Social Security number on there. Well, now you got a bunch of seniors walking around with a card with their Social Security number on it, and obviously that's not a good thing. So they decided to revamp the whole thing. So the Social Security card, the Social Security number is now a number letter indicator, and you don't know where in the country it was issued, whereas the Social Security, you can kind of figure that out based on the numbers. You can't do that with the new Medicare card. So it's a good thing. Everybody should have gotten that new Medicare card by now. I think Colorado's were mailed out by last November. So if you have people that don't have a card yet, they can call Medicare and find out why their new card isn't in. They're going to use the Social Security numbers through the end of the year, but after that, those numbers are going away. And again, contact Social Security for a replacement card. So this on the left-hand side is what the old one looked like. This is the new Medicare card. As you can see, it's got the number letter indicator. They still do put the effective date of Part A and B on the card, because we need that a lot. And those numbers, those dates don't necessarily have to match if you've deferred your Part B. But anyway, that's what the 2 cards look like. So the card has arrived. Let's say you're working in the car, you get your card in the mail because you turned 65 and you're collecting Social Security. So that's the only way that Medicare is going to know that you're 65, is if you begin to collect your Social Security before age 65, you're in the system. And when you turn 65, you're automatically signed up for Medicare. You're going to get your card in the mail. You're going to go, oh, I didn't sign up. Why did I get this? Because you're collecting Social Security. If you don't collect Social Security at 65, you're going to just wait, right? Then you have to manually sign up for Medicare at age 65. You either have to go into Social Security or you can do it online now, but you have to manually sign up. Most people go ahead and take their Part A because it's free. They've done those 40 work quarters or those 10 years, so they're able to get their Part A premium free. I didn't mean free, I meant premium free, because there's always costs associated on the back end with these things. You know, you got your co-pays, your deductibles, all of that stuff, hospital stays, that kind of thing. Some defer their Part B, again, due to active current employer coverage. So you can't have retiree insurance, you can't have COBRA, you can't have Connect for Health, and those don't count. You have to have active employer insurance to be able to defer your Part B at a later date and not get penalized. Because Medicare will penalize you if you don't sign up for these various parts of Medicare when you're first eligible. Let's say you just wait for whatever reason, and I've heard them all, you will get a penalty for not signing up when you were first eligible. Now, they're not enormous penalties, but a 10% penalty on your Part B and a 1% penalty on your Part D can add up over time, and your Part B penalty is forever. So here's the Medicare basics. There's 4 parts to Medicare. You got your A, which is your hospital insurance. So that means if you ever get hospitalized, your Part A will kick in, which is why I encourage people to go ahead and get their A, even if they're going to defer their B. Because let's say you have employer insurance and, of course, hospitalization's on there, but it may not cover everything. And if you pick up your Medicare Part A, then that would be your secondary insurance, and maybe that would cover the things that your employer insurance wouldn't cover. So I encourage people to go ahead and sign up for their A if they're eligible. You got your B, which is your medical insurance. And the way I explain that is, let's say you hurt your wrist. You're trying to get a moth out of the car, I don't know. You hurt your wrist, and you have to go to the doctor. Well, you're sitting in the doctor, they do the x-rays, they put the cast on and all of that. Because they did it in a doctor's office setting, it's considered medical or Part B. Your medical and Part B premium, everybody pays the Part B premium, whether they're low income and they get it paid for them, or they pay it on their own. Everybody pays Part B. In 2019, it's $135.50 a month. Next year, it's going up to $144 a month. So that's quite a jump in 1 year. I've never seen it jump that much in 1 year, but it is going up in 2020. Your Part C are your optional plans. So when people come into Medicare, they have some options about how they want to get their health care. You can either stay on original Medicare, which is just your A and your B, right? And then you pick a Part C optional, a Part D plan, which is your drug plan, and you're good to go. One of the things about staying on original Medicare A and B is that Medicare picks up 80%, with the beneficiary being responsible for the other 20%. That may not sound like a lot, but 20% of $100,000 is a lot, and it's a lot for these seniors. So there's always that 20% gap where you have to wonder, how am I going to pay this? And another thing about original Medicare A and B, it's called original Medicare, is that there is no out-of-pocket maximum on original Medicare. So you could accrue $500,000 in bills, and you're going to be responsible for 20% of that. We also have what's called Medicare Advantage plans as an option under C, and that's sort of the plans that you're probably familiar with through work, where you have to stay within a network like Kaiser, Blue Cross, Aetna, Cigna. You have to stay within a network. And if you want to go outside of that network for care, you have to get referrals, authorizations, and that kind of thing. We're sort of familiar with that through work. Those are called the Medicare Advantage plans. And what they do is it replaces your original Medicare, but you're still covered by Medicare. You're just getting your care in a different way. The other option is called a Medigap or a Medicare supplement. And it's called a Medigap because it fills the gaps of that 20% that you would be responsible for in Medicare, original Medicare A and B. So, and we're going to talk about these things in a little bit. And I got to say right off the bat, this is a lot of dense information. I get it. I've just been doing this a while. But I know if this is kind of going, what is she? I get it. If this is your first foray into Medicare, I know where you're at right now. But I'm happy to share my PowerPoint slides after the presentation if you want to email me with those. And it kind of helps to just reinforce what I've talked about. But I get it. This is a lot of dense information. But the Medigap policies are also available, and we'll talk about those in a sec. And then the last part is your prescription drug plan. Prescription drugs for Medicare only came into existence in 2006. Some of you may remember the news at that time, how angry seniors were about, this drug plan coming in and how much they were going to have to pay. Well, it does cover prescription drugs. You hear about it in the news still about how drug companies manipulate. I don't know anything about that. I do know that there are, every drug plan has to cover, at least the basics of every, the drugs that are out there. You can't have plans that just refuse to cover drugs because, or refuse to cover expensive drugs. That's not how it works. But every senior has to have a prescription drug plan. A lot of seniors call our office and say, I don't take any drugs. Why should I have to take a drug plan? I completely get it. There's a lot of seniors out there just on vitamins. I completely get it. But I explain it, it's like car insurance, right? You got a car, you don't have car insurance, you get in a wreck, now you have no coverage. What happens, I tell them, if you don't take any drugs now, something happens mid-year and you get put on some expensive drugs and you have no drug plan. With Medicare, you cannot pick up a drug plan in the middle of the year. There's only specific times of the year that you can enroll in a drug plan, and it becomes effective a couple months after that. So if you get put on an expensive drug in May, you have to wait until open enrollment, which is October 15th through December 7th, to pick up a drug plan with it becoming effective January 1st. So that means from May to December, you're going to be paying for that drug on your own. So that's one of the ways I explain to seniors why it is important. Not to mention you'll get a penalty attached if you don't pick it up when you can. So wait, what? You got to pay for Medicare? Yes. So Part A is usually premium free. We talked about that, right? Because you've paid in your entire working life. Part B, again, is going up to $144 per month. Everybody pays. Some people pay higher depending on your income. It's called IRMA, and it's the income-related monthly adjustment amount, something very similar to that. But if you make over, let's say, I think it's $85,000 a year, then you're going to pay a little bit more for your Part B premium than somebody that makes under $85,000 a year. And believe it or not, we get calls at SHIP about that all the time. People don't like to have to pay that extra surcharge for their Part B. Part C, again, they're optional choices, but they all have premiums. Whether you go with a Medicare Advantage, a Medigap, they're going to have premiums and costs associated with that. And then the Part D plan, the lowest plan in 2019 was $18.60 a month. And that's, let's say, if you don't take any drugs, you're going to get charged $18.60 a month just for having the drug plan. So hospital insurance, again, most people get premium-free Part A if they have enough work orders. If not, premiums start at $437 a month for Part A. Now, I would say 98% of people have premium-free Part A because you've all paid into the system. But if you don't, let's say you're new to this country, you're going to pay $437 a month. And it depends on the amount of quarters you have. So that can be shaved off if you have some work quarters. And as you work and continue to accumulate quarters, you can get your Part A premiums less and less. So there is light at the end of that tunnel. If you go into the hospital, any hospital stay means there's a $1,364 deductible per benefit period, and a benefit period runs for 60 days. So on that 61st day, you hit a new benefit period, and you would have to pay that $1,364 again if you go back into the hospital. And then there's daily charges as well, and that depends on the type of Part C plan you pick. And you would know going in, if you picked a Kaiser plan, you're going to know going in, if I'm in the hospital for day 1 through 45, here's what I'm going to pay. Day 46 through whatever, here's what I'm going to pay. So they do spell it out for you. It covers, Part A covers your inpatient stays, skilled nursing stays, so you're in the hospital but they can't release you to go home because you're not well enough and you have to go to a skilled nursing facility. They'll pay for that as well, but only if you've had a 3-night stay in the hospital. And it's it's a whole issue around observation is what it's called. So you can go to the hospital and be what's called under observation. You can have a gown, you could be in a bed, they could bringing you meals for 2 or 3 days. But if you're not actually admitted into the hospital and you're considered what's observation, if you go to a skilled nursing stay after that stay in the hospital, it won't be paid for because you weren't admitted for at least 3 nights. And I tell beneficiaries all the time, if you look like you're getting admitted to a hospital, ask the question, am I admitted or am I under observation? Because if you're under observation, you could, at any time you can say, I don't want to do this. But at least at the end of that 5 days, you're not going to be presented with a bill going, oh, well, you were just being observed that whole time. And people don't know. I mean, when we go to the hospital, we don't know, right? If I had a gown and people were bringing me food, I'm thinking I'm admitted. But you have to ask the question. Some home health care is covered, hospice is covered, and blood after the first 3 pints is covered under Part A. Part B is your medical again. That's your wrists and your casts and that. Most people pay $135.50, going up to $144. Again, it depends on your income with that IRMA. If you're enrolled late, penalties apply. If you're receiving any sort of excess pension, the premium will be automatically withdrawn, and if not, you're billed quarterly. I always encourage my beneficiaries to get that set up on auto pay. That way they don't have to worry about it. If something goes wrong and their bank didn't make the premium, that's something that we can fight. If they just went out of town and forgot to make the premium and they get dropped, that's a whole nother problem. So I tell people, as much as they don't like people in their bank accounts and that, it really does protect them to make sure that these things are automatically coming out of their bank account. The Part B deductible is $185 a year this year. I'm not sure what it's going up to in 2020. But even if you go in and get your wrist fixed, you still got to pay that $185 deductible one time in the year before they'll put the casts and everything on you. So Part B covers outpatient care, preventative care, lab, x-rays, tests, home health, ambulance. That's another one that comes up that we get involved in a lot because, ambulance, they contract out to these ambulance companies, and so they can charge pretty much whatever they want, and so we get involved with that a lot. Or the doctor will say, hey, you need an ambulance, and then later they'll say, you could have had your Uncle Joe take you, didn't really need it. We get involved there too. Durable and medical equipment is also covered under B. That's your wheelchair, your oxygen, your walkers, that kind of thing. Oxygen, those things are covered under B. So what's excluded? Drugs unrelated to the illness, private duty nursing, Medicare doesn't cover that. Long-term care, how many in here know that Medicare does not cover long-term care? Okay, Medicare does not cover long-term care. See, this is exactly, so most of the people who are on long-term care are on Medicaid. What they do is spend down their assets to be able to qualify for Medicaid to be able to get long-term care. Medicare does not cover long-term care. They do have some long-term care partnerships for long-term care policies, and there are long-term care policies out there, but from my understanding is you really have to read those policies to make sure that when you're needing this long-term care, that what you think you're going to get is in the policy. Because sometimes they call our office and they think, I've been paying on this for years, and now my mother's going in and they're telling her she has to wait 45 days for coverage to start. Well, it says that clearly in the policy. It's just not one of those things that you think about when you're purchasing the policy. Medical care outside the U.S., Medicare doesn't cover. So I look at House Hunters International wondering, what are all these people doing for medical care when they're moving to Venezuela? I want to move to Venezuela, but I don't know what I'm going to do about my health care. So I really have a question about that. Maybe they're on the border and they're coming into the U.S. and getting their care, but Medicare's not going to cover care outside the U.S. Homemaker services, somebody to come in, clean and cook, Medicare's not going to pay for, unless it's a short-term situation after a skilled nursing stay. Non-emergency transportation services, you can't get your brother to take you to the hospital and then chart, Medicare for the transpo. Routine dental, vision, and hearing, I heard that earlier today. Medicare does not cover those things. I know. Those are things that seniors need, but, you know, what I'm finding more and more, and you might have seen these commercials for the Medicare Advantage plans in 2020, they're starting to open up those services a little bit. I'm seeing those commercials more and more. Take all that with a grain of salt, because what I'm finding is, yeah, they may cover dental, vision, and hearing. They're going to charge you a little more for that, but they're not going to let you come in the first month and get a bunch of crowns. You're going to have to wait a couple years on that insurance to be able to get the big stuff. So I tell my people, you know, check around, make sure that if you're going to pick up a Delta Dental or Vision, you know, make sure that they're going to cover the things that you're specifically needing. Now, Medicare will cover things like cataracts and, you know, those kinds of things, but the routine, no. Alternative medicine, they're not going to cover marijuana, you know, Roku or Reiki, the massages and that kind of thing. Medicare's not that advanced. They're not quite there yet. So these are the premiums that you pay. Part A is zero for most people, unless you haven't got your work quarters, and then you might pay $437 a month. Your Part B premium, and that's just your premium. That's not all the copays, deductibles, and all the other stuff. Your Part C plan, they vary depending on the type of plan you get. There are a couple of zero premium Medicare Advantage plans, like Kaiser has a lot of them, and few people have a couple zero premium, but you're going to pay on the back end. You may not pay a monthly premium, but when you go in to get services, you're going to pay then. But I got a lot of seniors that get those plans because they don't really go to the doctor a lot, and for them it's perfect because it's a zero premium. If you don't ever go throughout the year, you've paid nothing and you're covered. So Medicare Advantage plans are not bad for people that don't have a lot of illnesses. And then your Part D plans, they vary from $1,680 to $132. And I got to tell you, in the 6 years I've been doing this, I've never signed anybody up for a plan that's over $32, $40 maybe. And that's on the high end. Because again, most of these plans carry most of the drugs. So to get a $132 plan, I just can't imagine why you would do that. So IRMA, we talked about IRMA a little bit ago. IRMA is the income-related monthly adjustment amount. Oh, man. I know that like the back of my hand, but I can't think of it right now. But it is the surcharge that's added to Part B or D. And again, if you make over $85,000 a year, or I think it's $170 as a couple, you're going to pay a little bit more for your B and D. And again, it's based on your income, and they go back 2 years. So we get this call a lot too, and they say, well, we sold a house last year, which brought our income up. Now we're going to get an IRMA surcharge, but in 2 years after you've sold that house and it's off your IRS credit or your IRS, then that'll drop off and you'll go back to your normal Part B, Part D amount. So there's a little light at the end of the tunnel. These are the Part B IRMA costs. I'm not going to read those to you. I'm just going to let you look at it. And you can tell as your income gets a little higher, you pay a little bit more. But again, even at $500,000 and above, that's not a bad problem to have. I'll take that problem any day and pay $460 for my Part B. Absolutely. So there's enrollment periods. So if it's not confusing enough, Medicare has specific enrollment periods for specific parts of Medicare. You can't just get on Medicare at any time of the year. You cannot do that. So your initial enrollment period, they call it the IEP, is 7 months around your 65th birthday. So if your birthday's in September, you have June, July, August, September, October, November, December to sign up for Medicare with no penalties. If you're outside of that area, you're going to get penalties attached because you didn't sign up when you were first eligible. The 24th month of cash payment from Social Security, on that 25th month, your Medicare will kick in. You may defer B again due to client or spouse still working with no penalty. You have a special enrollment period, which is 8 months from the loss of creditable coverage. So if you decide you're going to leave work or you get laid off, right? Let's say you get laid off. You have 8 months from the time you get laid off to determine if you're going to get on Medicare or not. And I think they give you 8 months to really give people time to absorb the shock of the layoff, decide, am I going to retire? Am I going to go back to work? All of those things. So they give you 8 months to decide with no penalties. They're not. No, they're really not. Medicaid, it's up to the beneficiary really to seek this information out, but you're not going to get anything in the mail that says, hey, you have your 8-month clock is ticking. No. And the other problem with that is a lot of times these HR departments, they don't know this information either. They don't know how their insurance works with Medicare. It is what it is. So we do a lot of education around that as well. So there's no penalty if you sign up within that 8 months, you're good to go. You got a general enrollment period for people who missed the first 2 for whatever reason. You can sign up between January 1st and March 31st with the coverage becoming effective July 1st. So you're penalized. You have 6-month wait there with no insurance. That is really scary. Especially if you're active, that's really scary. But a penalty will apply because you didn't sign up when you could. Now, to make this more confusing, this year in 2019, they opened up a new Medicare open enrollment period. And that open enrollment period is from January 1st to March 31st, where you can get out of a Medicare Advantage plan and get into a different Medicare Advantage plan with no questions. That's brand new. Usually if you sign up for a plan during open enrollment, you're stuck with it throughout the year. And people don't like that because, you show up in February and you're like, oh, I should have got on Kaiser and I got on Aetna. You are now able to switch to Aetna if you want to do that, but only within the first 3 months of the year. So again, there's late enrollment penalties, 10% on Part A, 10% on Part B, but most people won't get an A because it's free for most people. Part C, there's no penalties. Part D, there's a 1% penalty that eventually does drop off. So the Part C Medicare health plans are called, also known as Part C plans, Medicare Advantage plans, HMOs, you probably know them as HMO PPOs. They're regulated by Medicare. Again, these are the Kaiser, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Humana, United Health, all of those. And you have to stay within a network. So they're a little bit more restrictive, HMOs being more restrictive than the PPOs. But about 31% of people are on Medicare Advantage plans. About 2/3 of the people that sign up for Medicare stay on original Medicare. You can join a Medicare Advantage plan from October 15th. We're coming up on open enrollment through December 7th with the plan becoming effective January 1st. And let's look at a couple of these plans. So you got, again, the HMOs, the PPOs, and then you have special needs plan. We call them SNPs. And they are for people that have specific illnesses. There are specific plans sort of geared toward them. One of the ones that was most popular was a plan for people with kidney problems, and that went away last year. We're really hoping that comes back because that affects a lot of our beneficiaries. And they really like that plan a lot, but hopefully it'll come back this year as well. So the premium factors they're calculated by the company and the plan, your geographical areas, your zip code, and your prescription drug list. So those things are going to determine what you pay for your Medicare Advantage plan. Again, October 15th through December 7th is our annual enrollment period. We're coming up on that. What else could I say? You can switch from one MA plan to another. You can switch from a MA plan that doesn't offer drugs to the one that does, and vice versa. You can change your drug plan at that time of the year. Because if you have original Medicare or a Medigap, you have to get a standalone drug plan to go with that, or else you wouldn't have a prescription drug plan. So this would be the time of the year to change those plans as well. So that's what I tell my beneficiaries: talk to your doctor, make sure they're going to take that plan next year, because they can all of a sudden decide in December, you know what, we're not taking Aetna next year. You're on Aetna, you had no idea. You go to the doctor, he says, we don't take your insurance anymore. So I make sure, ask your doctor in the fall which plans are going to take in the upcoming year so they can start planning. Again, there's that new open enrollment period for 2019. One of the great things about this, though, that's brand new is that you can drop your MA plan, return to original Medicare, and pick up a standalone drug plan outside of the open enrollment period. That has never happened before where you could get a drug plan out of open enrollment. So this year, starting this year, you can if you take advantage of this open enrollment period. So the Part C plans, they are also called Medigap policies. You'll hear them called MedSups. But I refer to them as lettered plans when I'm talking to beneficiaries, because a lot of times they don't know if they have Medicare, they don't know Medicare Advantage, they just don't have a clue. So I'll ask them, is it a lettered plan that you have? And they'll say, yes, I have an F. So Medigaps are the lettered plans. There's 11 plans, A through N, they're not all represented. The most comprehensive is the F plan. It covers 100% of everything, which is a great plan, but the premiums reflect that coverage, right? So I tell people, they ask me all the time, should I get into a Medicare Advantage or a Medigap? And what I say is you have to weigh out some factors. What was your parents' health like? What is your health like? You know, insurance is always sort of a crystal ball. We're always looking ahead, right? Because that's how we have to do it. So that's the kind of things I ask them. What's your health like? Can you afford a Medigap? Because if you can't afford it, there's no sense getting into it and a couple months later you can't afford the premiums. So that's another thing I ask. Can you afford the higher premiums? These are sold by private insurance companies. They're regulated by the Division of Insurance, not CMS. Medicare Advantage and Part D plans are regulated by CMS. Medigaps are regulated by the DOI, Division of Insurance. So if there's any sort of rate increases, they have to go through the Division of Insurance to get those rate increases. Various plans offer additional benefits. One of the beauties about a Medigap is that you could take it anywhere in the country. If you move to Idaho, you can take it with you. You could take that same plan to Colorado or California because it's a standardized plan. What's in an A is in an A no matter where you are. F is an F is an F. So you can take that around the country with you when you move. People like that. Again, they cover the gaps in original Medicare, 10 standardized policies, they're lettered plans. F is the most popular, it's 100% of everything. It's being phased out in 2020. And the reason we were told is that people that have the F, and I would say the majority of the people on a Medigap have an F, is that they doctor too much. I say if I have a plan that covers 100% of everything and I get something, I'm going in because I paid and it's going to be covered. So what they're doing is they're phasing out the F, but the G is really covers the same as the F, but there's $185 deductible with the G. And I would tell the people even prior to this, get quotes on the, if you're interested in the F, get the quote on the F for the whole entire year and add that up. Get the quote on the G for the entire year because those premiums are going to be less. Add those up. Add the $185 to the G, and you're probably going to come out cheaper with that G than the F anyway. So, you know, that's just what I tell my beneficiaries to work out that math, but the F is going away in 2020. Purchasing a Medigap. So you can purchase a Medigap at any time of the year. They're not restricted to that open enrollment, October 15th to December 7th. However, as long as they're accepting new applications, because they could at any time say, no, we don't want to accept you. They have to accept you it's called a guarantee issue, and it's 6 months after you get your Part B. You get a guarantee issue into a Medigap, no questions asked. They cannot turn you down. And at that, you know, 60 or 6 months and a day, if you go in to apply, they could say, sorry, you have too many illnesses, we're not going to pick you up. So we tell people if you're interested in a Medigap, you got to get it within that first 6 months of getting your Part B. However, the catch-22 is they can pick you up in June for a Medigap, but you can't get a drug plan until open enrollment, which becomes effective January 1st. So the only way that really works is if people have a drug plan somewhere else, maybe through their job, maybe they have VA coverage, you know, TRICARE, something like that. That works for those people. But if you don't have a drug plan, you can't get into, you can get into one, but then you wouldn't have drugs to go along with that. These are the Medigap or Medicare Advantage plan, or I'm sorry, Part D prescription drug plans. And you'll hear them called all of these things here, PDPs, prescription drug plans. They are also run by private insurance companies, which I know you've heard on the news, but they are regulated by CMS, the drug plans. So the drug must be federally approved and require a prescription in order for it to be covered by Medicare. They generally cover all drugs during a covered stay, such as inpatients at hospitals or nursing care facilities, but they also have to be medically necessary and used for the purpose that it was created for. You can't get a drug that, and it works here, sort of like Skin So Soft works for bugs. It doesn't work like that. If you have a drug that is specific for this, you have to use it for that or it's not going to be covered. Most outpatient drugs are covered under Part D, and those are the ones that you self-administer, those maintenance drugs you take every day, those are covered by Part D as well. Prices are negotiated with Medicare, not as much as our seniors would like, but they are. The plans, they manage access to their drugs by a couple of ways. One are formularies. Formularies are just the list of drugs that that particular company carries on with their plan. That's called a formulary. And so when we're looking for plans for people during open enrollment, to me, the one thing that drives the plan they pick are all your drugs on the formulary. Because if they're not, you're not even going to look at that plan because now your drugs aren't all covered. Prior authorization. Some seniors don't like to get prior auth for drugs. So if we pull up a plan and a lot of them show that there's prior authorization needed, we'll look at another plan. Some people don't care. Step therapy. People hate step therapy. What that is it means if you get put on a drug, they're going to start you at that lowest cost drug first, keep you on that for a while, and up the step therapy to the more expensive drugs because it saves them money to do that. Our seniors don't like it though because now they're on this drug and a lot of times it might make them sick and then they have to go to another drug and they can't, level out on it. So they don't like step therapy, and so if that's something that plan requires, we may not look at that plan. Quantity limits is another. Maybe you need 45 pills a month, but the plan only says they give out 30, then every month you would have to get a quantity limit exception. That may or may not be something that seniors want to do. Formularies. The costs are determined by the tier. So they have a formulary, but there's 5 tiers. Tier 1 being the least expensive, Tier 5 being those boutique drugs. So when you look at a plan's formulary, you're going to know where your drug is on the tier as well. And so these are just sort of the differing tiers. And of course, generic's going to be less than brand, but some people can't take a generic. They have to stick with the brand. Prior authorization, again, plans require prior authorization to be sure that drugs are prescribed and being used correctly. Least expensive to more expensive on the step therapy, and then needing more pills or tablets than the plan allows. So drug plans are approved by Medicare. They can be flexible. They must offer at least a standard level of coverage. They can't decide, well, we're not going to put that expensive drug on our formulary. They can't decide to do that. They can change year to year, and they do. So I tell people, don't just get on a plan and stay on that plan forever because those drugs can change, and then a drug that you've been taking is no longer on that plan. So I tell people it really, really behooves you to look at your plan every year to make sure you're on the best plan you could be on going into the next year. Some drugs are excluded from all the plans. There's some drugs that just nobody covers. But let's say you are on a plan, you get in a plan, and in May, your doctor prescribes a drug that isn't on that plan's formulary. Well, you didn't know that when you signed up. There are avenues to sort of help with that. They can file an appeal, and we can help them do that to get that drug just for them for the rest of the year. And then it's up to them to find a plan with that drug on it. But we can do it. It's not an overnight process, but, it's doable. Here's the Part D IRMA cost. That's that little surcharge you pay if you make over a certain amount of money. And I'll just let you look at that for a sec. So with Part D comes the donut hole. I don't know how much of you have heard about the donut hole. But I brought a graphic that is out there on that table that is the best explanation for a donut hole I've ever seen. It's a visual, and it explains the donut hole in a way that I've never been able to explain it. So if you're curious at all, I would encourage you to pick that up. It basically means that there's you get your drug, and let's say your drug is really an expensive drug. So by, let's say, February, you're already in the donut hole because your drug is so expensive. And basically, it's just an area here where you pay this amount for your drug, and then when you hit a certain amount, and I'm just going to say $5,000, then the plan starts kicking in a little bit more. You're in the donut hole. So the plan kicks in a little bit more for that drug. And then you become at a catastrophic, and the plan kicks in like 95%, and you only have to pay 5%. The donut hole doesn't hit a lot of people, but if it does, it can be devastating, because when you're in that one slice, your drugs are very, very expensive. Now, the donut hole is shrinking through 2020, and that was a direct benefit from the ACA. The donut hole is going to be shrinking, so people are happy about that. But before the ACA, you were 100% out of pocket for these drugs. And, you know, again, this can financially devastate people having to pay for their drugs. So if you're at all interested in the donut hole, there's a great graphic out there that really explains it to you. So 5 minutes, oh my gosh, 5 minutes, I have about 1,000. Okay, so Part D enrollment periods, just like Part B, Part D has their own enrollment periods, and I think she had mentioned that, so you can see how confusing it gets. But the Part D enrollment is 7 months around your 60th birthday. You can defer your D if you have creditable coverage from another source. Creditable just means as good or better than Medicare. Your annual enrollment period we're getting ready to come up on is another time you can enroll in your drugs. During the open enrollment, you could join a prescription drug plan, you could switch from one to another, or you could drop your drug plan completely if you have creditable coverage from somewhere else. Extra help. So there is help paying for these costs for low-income seniors. And one help to pay for your prescription D drug costs is called the Extra Help Program. It's run by Social Security. If your income level is a certain amount, and I put income levels out there for all of these programs as well, you can get help paying for your Part D. We have a lot of seniors that get extra help to pay for their Part D. Eligibility is determined by Social Security, not us. If eligible, though, they can change Part D plans every 3 months. They used to be able to change any time of the year, but because of doctor shopping and all this pill problem, now they're only able to every 90 days to switch their Part D plan. Benchmark plans, these are for low-income people who qualify for the low-income subsidy. And some Part D plans have zero premium, zero deductible, very low copays, but again, you have to qualify for these programs. Some people are better off with non-benchmark because not all the drugs are represented on those plans, but for the most part, those work for low-income people. Our LINET program, this is run by Humana, independent of their insurance, and it's basically for people, low-income people, when they sign up for Medicare, they get automatically put on a drug plan. And I don't know if you guys know this, but they get automatically put on a drug plan. And the reason being that they may have a lot going on in their life where they can't sign up on their own, and they don't want them to not have a drug plan. So CMS will sign them up for a drug plan. And there's just 4 plans that they have. This person gets this one, the next one gets this one, and they just do that. So it may not be the best plan for these people. And we get the call saying, I never signed up for Express Scripts, how am I on this? They were automatically signed up. They can move to another drug plan, but they just get put in one as a placeholder to make sure they have a drug plan. You may experience that and wonder, yeah, why did they just put them in a drug plan? That's why. So the LINET program, let's say they have a plan, but they don't have a card yet, but they need their medications. They can go to a pharmacy, show some sort of best available evidence, maybe their Medicaid award letter or something showing that they qualify, and they can get their drugs from the pharmacy before they get their card. We have Medicare assistance programs that help with your Part B, Part A premiums, and those are called the qualified Medicare beneficiaries. specified low income, Slim B, and then this last one, qualified disabled and working. I've actually never signed anybody up for that, but it is out there. It's usually number one, the Q&B program, and that's help paying for your Part A, Part B premiums. We have a lot of seniors that qualify for that. And that would be, HCPF is the people that determine eligibility for that. Medicare and Medicaid, so you got people dual eligibles that are on both programs. Medicare is a federal insurance program. Medicare bills are paid from trust funds that you've all paid into, that Medi on your check. That's how they get paid. Serves people primarily over 65. Small monthly premiums required for non-hospital coverage. Medicaid is an income-based program serving low-income people of every age. Usually there's little or no cost for these services if you're on Medicaid. It's a federal state program, but it varies state to state. So people will move here all the time thinking the benefits are the same from where they came, and Colorado can be very different from where they came from. I think you have to be in the state 30 days to even apply for Medicaid. But anyway, it works pretty well. I tell people, if they have Medicare, Medicaid, that's some of the best insurance you can have. Like, the only thing better would be congressional insurance or TRICARE, but really, if you have Medicare, Medicaid, that's really good insurance. Dual eligible, we just talked about the dual eligibilities. Yeah, they have some special rights. Their enrollment penalties get wiped away because they're low income anyway, so they're not going to get hit with, penalties, enrollment penalties, that kind of thing. They can switch plans every 90 days, and they never enter the donut hole. Because again, they're low income. Why put that burden on them, right? They have special benefits. They get help with their drug costs, help with Part B premiums. Medicaid may cover some drugs that Medicare doesn't. And again, they never enter the donut hole. So who pays first? For services covered by both Medicare and Medicaid, Medicare is the primary payer for doctor's visits, hospital care, and home care, and skilled nursing care. So that's who pays first. And where can you find a doctor? On Medicare.gov, there's a place for you to for beneficiaries to find doctors. But I tell them, don't go by that list. Always call your doctor's office and say specifically, I'm looking at plans for next year. Is a doctor going to take this plan next year? Be very specific about it, but never just, go off a website and take that for gospel. So SHIP, this is us. So what can we do? So we provide help finding providers. We compare coverage choices for people. We're coming up on our busiest time of the year because this is open enrollment. We help with Linet. We help with bills and claims. We file complaints and appeals for people all the time. We sign them up for those cost-saving programs or tell them how to do it, because a lot of our seniors are computer savvy. We give referrals to other programs a lot, and we file complaints with CMS a lot for people. And here's some resources, my phone number, just some resources that we use if you're ever interested. I put some rack cards out there for SHIP, so if you have any questions about any of this, really, feel free to call me. I love nothing better than answering Medicare questions from people, because I don't want you stuck, not being able to help a beneficiary and you're stuck. Just call me. If I don't have the answer, I can certainly find the answer for you, and I'm happy to be a resource for you. And that's my phone number there, 894-2946. You just leave a message for Kathy and I'll get back with you. There's my email address. If you prefer to email me, I'm happy for you to do that. And we get calls from all over the state all the time. Don't feel like and we're happy to come out and talk to your people. If you want a presentation at your group, we're happy to do that. So, jot my information down there and please use me as a resource. I'm happy to be that for you. So thanks for listening to my Medicare presentation. I appreciate it, and go forth and help Medicare beneficiaries. Oh, any questions? I didn't even ask that. Are there any questions? I know there's lots of questions, but you'll ask me in private. That's awesome.
Yeah, So Kathy, if you don't, are you gonna stick around? Maybe you could ask some questions one-on-one? Thank you so much. Medicare is such a complex topic, and you did a great job on really kind of make it universal and understandable. I know that personally, in the other hat I wear with a nonprofit organization that serves seniors, there's this challenge around differentiating Medicaid and Medicare, and just those two slides alone really kind of do a good job on outlining the differences. But I want to thank you all again for taking the time to attend this morning, and some great information again from both of our presenters. Both trainings will be available online on our website. This is a recorded session, and I know some came for the CEUs, and the certificates will be at the table on your way out. And if you have any questions for CREP in particular, myself and Leah and Carrie are available. And thank you again. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone.